it's half a good message. Okay, welcome back, people. We're now doing the next in the lessons, which is actually learning how to use arrays. And as you can see, actually, that's not on our little garden path, because I suppose when we look at the inputs and outputs and arithmetic operators, that sort of comes under sequence. So one thing's done after another. And then we did the if, else statements. That's selection statements where we select to do one bit of code or another. And then we did for loops and while loops, and that would be iteration, where we repeat statements. Now, the next thing we're going to be looking at doing is using arrays. And arrays is about how we hold data. Now, currently we hold data by using a single variable. An array is what we refer to as a data structure, so you can hold like a collection of things together. So instead of having, I don't know, let's say you want to hold some test scores, instead of having 10 test scores, you can just make use of an array to do it. So why don't we have a look at doing that? Pretend this wasn't here. Excellent. So I'm starting at this place, and let's say I want to have some test scores. So I'm just going to, in here, I'm going to int test1 equals 10 out of 20, int test2 equals 18 out of 20, etc., etc. Now, so I could create a bunch of variables. Often, though, it's much more powerful, since they're all related to each other, to collect all this related data together in what's called an array. So let's see how that would work. So I need to declare my data type. So they all need to be the same data type, in this case int. And then what I do is I open square bracket and close square bracket. And now that indicates it's what's referred to as a one-dimensional array, otherwise known as a list of data. Then I have the name, so I'll call it, I don't know, tests. And I could just do like that, semicolon. And that would be the same as saying int test3. So what have I done? I've just, with int test3, I declared a variable. I sort of created this space in memory. I said it's going to hold an integer. What value is it holding? No values. With my array here, I've said that it's an integer array. It's a one-dimensional integer array, and it's called tests. How much is it holding? We're not saying. So the next thing we can do is we can go equals, and this is where it can be a bit different. New int, open square bracket, and I'm going to put, say, 5 in. Okay, what's that done? Well, that's created a new integer array, as we described before, but I'm giving it some more information. What do you think that 5 signifies? If you guessed, it means that it's an array with 5 spaces. That's exactly what it is. So I've got 5 spaces. Each of those spaces are blank. To access one of those spaces, I can go tests, which is the name of my array. Now I want to get like one of the positions in that array. Open square brackets. Do you remember, like we did with strings, it's got an index, and the first item was at position 0, or the first character was at position 0. A string, and in some programming languages, a string is referred to as an array of characters. An array is very similar to a string, really, and we can say at position 0, and then we can set a value. So I don't know, they got 10, right? So like test1 here, we can say that, and we can say tests at position 1, so the second test, we could say was value 18. You see, now we're holding all those values together. What else can we do? Well, you know what? I'm not going to show that yet. I'm just going to delete all this. We don't need it. I'm just going to hold all the values. So I'm going to declare all of these. In fact, make my life a little bit easier. Let's just have 4. And then let's initialize my array with my other values. Now this would work. All it's going to do though is going to overwrite what's in position. Like imagine it's a bunch of boxes. In the first box with 10, which was already 10. But I don't want to do that. I want to do the next thing in the array, which is 2. And then I can say 14. And then the final test is 15. Brilliant. Well, that's how I add data into an array. Let's say I want to print out your first test score was... Actually, you know what? To make it easier to read so it doesn't fall off, I'm just going to say first test. And then you can go plus. And I want to extract what's in the first, what my first test is. Remember, that's at position 0, not at position 1. My background disappeared. Oh well. Plus tests square bracket 0. and that's going to extract that very first test. Okay, let's run it. There we go. First test at position 0, which is 10. And I print it at position 2. This will be the third test. There we go. So what are we talking about? Well, right now, it's like a repository, a place to store collected bits of data. How long can I make it? Well, I can make it, as large as I want. I get 400 in size. Maybe I could be storing 30. I could be storing the test score for all the students in the class, for instance. Okay. What can I do with it, though? Well, maybe instead of just printing out one test, what arrays work very well with is for loops. So I'm going to declare a for loop. Remember, I need 3 arguments. I need the counter, so I'm going to call it I short for index. I'm going to start at position 0. Why am I going to start at position 0? Because the first position is position 0. And then I will keep going until I get to the end of the array. Now, do you remember with a string, you did dot length, open bracket, square bracket, open regular bracket, close regular bracket? You got the similar thing here. We can actually find the length of an array, dot length. Dot length. And this time you don't actually need to do the brackets because length, an array is a primitive data type, so you don't need to actually call it as a method. And then I++, so it will go at 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, depending on the size. Open curly brackets for the for loop, and then it's pinched one down here, so I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to put in my curly bracket there. I'm going to run it. Okay, what do you think this is going to do? Is it going to turn out all the test scores? Is it? Make your predictions. Right, we're going to run it. Why did that happen? Right, it didn't print out all our test scores. It just printed out 14 4 times. Because in here, in test, we don't want to print out position 2 every time. First time we want to print position 0, then position 1, then 2, then 3. How do we do that? By making use of this variable, right, of I, because I will be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. So instead of test 2, we'll change it to test I. And now hopefully, if we run it, first test, though, doesn't make sense. So maybe what we can do is test, and then we can say plus I, and then speech marks, and then plus this. This is not going to do quite what you want it to do. So it's going to say test 0, test 1, test 2, test 3, because remember I starts at 1, so we can just plus 1 to it. There you go. Neat. What else can you do with an array? Well, you can do a whole bunch of things. You could go through it like you did with a character and systematically look for something. So you could say, maybe you're looking for every test that got more than 17. So if tests at position I, so as you go through it, is greater than what? Greater than 17, I said. So maybe greater than or equal to 17. Then, I don't know, maybe we'll have a new thing here. Int high scores. And we'll start that at 0. I might make this a bit smaller so we can start to see it all. Oop, too far. There you go. And every time you got greater than or equal to 17, you can just add 1 high scores plus plus. And then at the end of the for loop, we can say you have high scores over 17. You have for tests over 17. When we run it, it's going to step through our array and it's going to find that that one's there. What happens if I just insert some new tests in here? Test at position 4 equals 19. What will happen differently? Well, going through the length of the test. So although we have more items now, it will identify that there's now 5 here, so it should go through it all. it should find the new item. So in theory, oh, it's blown up horribly in our face because we've got an index out of bound. So we've got test.length. Oh, do you see the error? I've made a very silly error. Do you see it? It's on this line here, on line 10. Do you spot it? Yeah, I have to declare the size of an array. Planning for the future, an array is known as a static data structure because once I declare the size of it, it can't get bigger or smaller during an array. That is opposed to what's called a dynamic data structure, such as a list, which can get bigger and smaller, which we'll discuss later. So I need to make that 5. And now, success. And I got 2 tests over it. I said I was going to tell you something else about what you can do with arrays. Sometimes you don't want to declare them like this. Sometimes you want to actually give them all the values as you declare it. And you can do that. You open the curly brackets, and then you can go, I don't know, 3, 18, 4. Do you see what I'm doing to separate all the values? I'm putting commas down. 32 out 20. No, that won't work. 12, 5, and 8. You end it with curly brackets and colon. Right, well, how does it know the size? Well, it just looks inside here, counts the number of items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's made an array of 7 in size, and it's taken the scores. So that way you can both declare it and set the scores at the same time, and it works perfectly for us. Okay, so that's arrays. FYI, you can use any primitive data type, so I can do char, I don't know, letters. Obviously, you'll have to do, if you're setting at the same time, you'd have to do whatever's appropriate for that data structure. So that was for chars. So that's going to make a list, a one-dimensional array of type character. It's got 2 values in it. Could I do it for non-primitive data types, like a string? Absolutely, I can. String, names, equals. So I could do new string, size 5, and that would make a string of 5 in size. Or I can initialize it, curly brackets, Bob, I don't know, Ahmed, you know, Sarah, whatever. And now it's going to make an array of strings, each with their of size 3, and you could step through it that way. Okay, so they're really versatile. Arrays are everywhere, so you'll be making really good use of it. In another lesson, we'll look at 2-dimensional arrays. Let's save that for another time. Let's keep it for 1-dimensional at the moment. So, what's the problem you need to solve? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here we go. So, you want to input a new set of results. So this is essentially what we did. Request from a student. So instead of me typing it in, have the student input what score they got. So first of all, ask them how many tests you're taking. So maybe they took 5 tests. So then you need to make an array of that size. Then it needs to loop around 5 times. So I'd use a for loop. Ask them to input their test score into that array as it goes along. And then afterwards, you can ask them, do they want to change a test score? So test 1, say if it was 5 tests, I want to change test 3, and then change it to the new test score, whatever score that was going to be. And then output an average score. So using that same array, step through the array, output the average score, what the test number was in terms of, you know, which test did they get to. Which test number was the highest and which was the lowest, which is we've done before with a for loop. Okay? All right, well, best of luck. Believe in you guys. Give it your best shot.